Hello, everybody, and welcome back after a short break to the panel discussion on vulnerable populations. And today on the panel, we have Philomena Mwangi, who is the co-lead chapter of TechRefugees Kenya, Odelia Naomi, who is an innovation intern at Red Cross Kenya, and John Warrens, innovation officer at UNHCR Kenya. So I just really said your names, one of the main things that you're doing at the moment. Could you speak a little bit more about yourself, starting with Philomena, please?
Thank you, Mari. As you've said, my name is Philomena Mwangi, and I'm representing TechRefugees Kenya, which is one of the chapters of TechRefugees Global. So what TechRefugees is an organization, a volunteer organization that brings together people who are interested in matters to do with refugees and displaced persons. And what we do is that we look for tech solutions that address challenges faced by refugees. And these challenges are in the areas of information, access to information, health, access to education, employment, and such issues. So that's the work we do at TechRefugees, and I have been in TechRefugees Kenya since May of 2020. So that's just a brief background of who I am and what I do.
Thank you, Philomena. Who is next on the Zoom panel? John?
Hi, good morning, Mary. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this. My name is John Warrens. I'm working in UNHCR's Innovation Service based in Nairobi, but actually with a broader remit across UNHCR operations globally. And I co-lead a program that we have on digital access, inclusion, and participation. Refugees are, according to research undertaken by UNHCR, sometimes 50% less likely than hosting communities to have access to connectivity. This can be exacerbated based on digital gender divides, other types of characteristic or traits. And our program aims to provide country operations of UNHCR the support needed to address these challenges. We'll come on to these in the discussion today. Thanks.
Thank you. And Odelia?
Thank you, Mary, for the brief introduction. I'm Odelia Wanjala, Kenya Red Cross Society. Let me first acknowledge our innovation manager, Safia. I'm an electrical and electronics engineer by trade and currently part of the innovation unit. We solve problems by changing the current state of things. I have worked with nanotechnology lab and telecommunications lab in Istanbul, Turkey, where we have one of our prototypes, a cardio geoguard, that's sort of to improve access to healthcare for communities in rural Kenya. As a unit at Kenya Red Cross, we work on projects that aim to better the lives of communities around us. Aware of some of the challenges the community face, we thus employ technologies that come up with solutions. So currently we are working with blockchains to develop viable digital identities, mobile tokens for community currents, drones for the agricultural sector, and COVID hotspots disinfection. That is one of the things that we're working on. Our innovation hub or lab in Lamu offers technological training on which we sort of empower the innovative, the need to create, engineering need to create in the people and the community around us. We offer technological training, entrepreneurship skills for the community, digital fabrication training, and workshops on tools such as laser cutting that we employ that bring the community together and teach them how they can use it to better the economic stance in the society. And amazing at what you can do just by thinking differently. Thank you, Mari. Back to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all. I think one cool thing when I was speaking to you all over the course, like Monday to Wednesday, I think, was the fact that you are all from Kenya and you all seem to know each other quite well. So it's like a community. This, I hope it makes it even easier to talk today, that you already are aware of each other. But the opening question, I think, from my side would be perhaps a little bit more of philosophical kind, and also opens up the topic a little bit perhaps to the general public. My question is, what is vulnerability and what does that mean to you? And it doesn't have to be at all this textbook definition or, by different places. It just has to be, it should be your own understanding. What is vulnerability? What does it mean to you? And how does it affect us all? Perhaps because you're already here on the screen, Odilia?
Okay, thank you. When I hear vulnerability, the first thing that comes to my mind is being vulnerable, lacking something. Being able, as a person, vulnerability means being able to express what and who you genuinely are, showing your true self in whatever state you are, and no fear of judgment. Calling that friend that you haven't talked to years with fear of being rejected, that is vulnerability to me. And in this context, vulnerability kind of implies the reduced or limited capacity of one or an individual in a society to be able to deal with the impacts of disasters such as COVID, the reduced capacity to prepare for it and prepare for the aftermath. That is vulnerability to me. I think, and the severe impacts on the global pandemic here in Kenya has seen so many fellow Kenyans. About 5 million Kenyans lost their jobs during this pandemic, and the number could be higher given the large informal economics that we have in Kenya, because the circumstances change, and circumstances change can easily put anyone, any individual in society in a vulnerable position. So, and if I'm going to solve a problem, part of innovation unit here at Kenya Red Cross, we try to come up with ideas to solve community. I think it's important to be aware of it, because I'm going to solve it. I need to know what it is. I'll take an example. A user-centric design on digital identities would have a more better impact on the people we are trying to introduce it to, because we are able to get an idea from them on what or how they value identities and what it means to them. So we'll be able to implement or develop a solution that can easily work for them. This is where maybe inclusivity comes in when it comes to vulnerable populations, when it comes to creating solutions for them. We all need to be aware, they need to be aware, and together we need to be aware and consequently come together to develop required solutions. Back to you, Mary.
Thank you. Filomena, could you have, what's your own opinion on what's the vulnerability?
Thank you, Mari. So from my perspective, I look at vulnerability in the context of displaced persons or in the context of migration. And so vulnerability to me highlights the disadvantages that these groups of people are faced with. So vulnerability in the sense of they do not have access to identity, in a sense of if you move from one place to another from your country, if you're forced to move from your country because of conflict and you move to a different country, then you're given the status of a refugee, but not the status of a citizen. So there's vulnerability in that sense. There's also vulnerability in the sense of no access to employment opportunities, no access to education, no access to food security, for instance. So vulnerability to me then just highlights the differences between people who are living sort of, well, in this instance, living in urban areas as compared to those who are in marginalized areas, and also people who are confined to refugee camps. And so in that sense, I think vulnerability means that there are certain differences that these people are subjected to. So for a very long time, and even more recently, people have been speaking about vulnerability and trying to identify whether vulnerability is just another buzzword that people use, especially in the context of migration. And so a lot of people have been talking about this in the context also of, trying to come up with policy decisions. And so what we agree on, I think generally in this space is that, yes, there is vulnerability, but also trying to see how it is that we can play a part in using this vulnerability and coming up with solutions which address vulnerability. And so one of our principles at TechFugees is that when we're coming up with tech solutions, these solutions need to address inclusivity, in the sense that once we come up with a solution and we deploy it, then this solution should be able to be scaled and even to be used in different contexts, not just for refugees and displaced persons, but also, for instance, people living in slum areas, people who are facing unemployment. So our focus as TechFugees is to come up with solutions, and in that process of coming up with these solutions, not to further marginalize people who are already facing marginalization. So yeah, that I think to me is how I would sum up vulnerability.
Thank you so much for sharing the light on your opinion as well. John, you mentioned that you weren't a fan of the term vulnerability, and Philomena also said that, you know, it's not just another buzzword. But John, what does that mean to you, and how would you like to call or refer to vulnerable populations?
Yeah, thanks, Mary. Within our service, we tend not to like using this word. I think mainly because we don't see vulnerability as like a defining characteristic of somebody. Rather, people obviously face vulnerabilities in their unique circumstance, but actually Philomena touched on the language that we use, which is one of marginalization. It's obviously not there, you know, nothing inherent about that, but rather the system and society has obviously marginalized these groups. And that's bringing about language of the need for empowerment, the need to support these communities to become self-reliant, to empower them and move them away from marginalization, to allow their voices to be heard. So generally, we would use that sort of language when we talk about these things. However, obviously, vulnerabilities do exist for particularly specific groups. One of the key sort of myths I'd like to dispel is, you know, we often hear about people talking about refugees and forcibly displaced people as a homogenous group. Actually, it's quite diverse. You know, there's obviously massive differences in age and the type of issues people are feeling, whether they're elderly or young, on gender, men and women, and other characteristics such as disability or religious affiliation and so on. And all of these paint a very complex picture. And UNHCR has a age, gender, and diversity policy. And all that we do, we try and understand the needs of communities, not in a homogenous way, but rather all the unique characteristics that they may face. And all of those come with their unique vulnerabilities that obviously need to be addressed in very specific ways. And I think that some of the innovations, like our colleagues at the Red Cross and TechFugees are working on, obviously trying to address these for these types of specific groups.
Because you already also slightly touched it, and all of you actually slightly touched it. The good question to follow is how is focusing on the needs of the vulnerable people helping us to bridge the digital divide, like sort of like a cross-cutting theme of this hackathon as well. John, you know.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely true. I mean, we see that in many areas when we're doing assessments around digital access and digital inclusion of refugees, that often there's disparities based on gender, age, and other characteristics. Research that we undertook with the GSMA across 3 countries, Rwanda, Uganda, and Jordan, points to women being 89% less likely to use mobile internet compared to men in the 2 African countries that we're analyzing. And these are obviously like very specific. So when we're undertaking interventions, we're not going to be broad brush. We need to be targeted to address those types of divides and undertake projects accordingly. So I think that, it's great to have larger projects, but sometimes you do need these specific projects. And actually, we have one project at the moment where we're working with people with disabilities in Kenya to enhance the way that we're providing information by making our call center more accessible, by providing sort of text-based solutions as well as sign language interpretation. And these types of interventions that are targeted to particular vulnerabilities obviously then help create a more inclusive society and can support the self-reliance of those communities.
Mm-hmm. Philomena, what's your answer? Like, why is it that focusing? Why do we need to focus there? And also, you touched it already. This is like in somehow already repeating questions, but why do we need to focus on the needs of the vulnerable groups to help us bridge the digital divide?
I'll start off my response with one of our guiding principles as TechFugees, which is moving away from refugees to TechFugees. And what this basically means is that we need to have a human-centered approach to coming up with solutions which respond to the needs of displaced people. And so that means co-creation with the tech community in Kenya alongside displaced communities. And so what we do is that we work hand in hand with the tech community, but we also involve from very early on, we involve displaced communities. And so what we do is that we work in partnership with organizations such as, community-based organizations that are based in Kakuma refugee camp or Dadaab refugee camp, and we get involved with them right from the beginning, so that at the end of the process of coming up with solutions for displaced people, we are not responding to a need that we feel the displaced people have, but rather coming up with solutions and ideas to curbing the solutions using tech. But these are from the perspective of displaced people who are facing these challenges on a day-to-day basis. And so from our side, we also aim to empower refugees and displaced communities through training as we come up with solutions, so that right from the beginning we're empowering them from the stage of identifying what the needs are and then coming up with a solution. And so during the process of coming up with these solutions, we involve them at every stage, so that also there's a feedback loop between the teams that are working on these solutions alongside the displaced communities. And so also at the end of it, then we also impart skills on these displaced people to allow them to scale these solutions even moving forward. I hope that makes sense.
It makes complete sense. Actually, you also touched like another thing that I wanted to talk about, this like human-centric approach to all the solutions before starting to design them. But before we move on to that, Odelia, the same question to you as well. How does focusing on the needs of the vulnerable groups help us bridge the digital divide?
Okay, I can dare say that those with internet or access to internet and digital technologies have been less impacted with the measures taken to combat the spread of COVID, such as quarantine, staying at home, social distancing. This year has seen many people working from home. Digital technologies such as Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Skype, some that many didn't hear about before, have enabled many be productive working from home. This is not the case for those with limited technologies or internet access. As more conversations, meetings, business deals, job vacancies, and move online, and in multiple and more distant spaces, opportunities get a bit more closer to those with access to a stable internet and online connection, but further to those on the other side of the digital gap. Closure of schools in Kenya that happened around at the beginning of the year kind of showed or displayed the shift of a greatly digital inequalities that we are currently facing in Kenya, because many students were back home, but not so many could have access to the internet or connectivity, or not many could afford having connectivities at their place. To bridge this divide, everyone should be included. If we are trying to reach the SDG 9 goal, governments, international organizations, and societies need to take necessary measures, providing affordability and accessibility if we're all aiming for a digital revolution. I was in some part of Kenya in the beginning of the pandemic, in Western Kenya, and I was a volunteer teacher at the time, and many students could not access classes online because even before the pandemic, internet or credit could be bought with as little as 20 Kenya shillings, which was the amount before the pandemic. But after the pandemic, when you constantly required to be available online to access all what you're doing online, Wi-Fi was an unthinkable thing for most of the people there, kind of a luxury. We cannot have a digital revolution without including everyone. If we're aiming towards a digital revolution, we all need to be in it together. We need to bring everyone on board. Important to solve numerous issues that the vulnerable communities face for the continual running of their activities, because most of them have I think are empowered with smartphones or feature phones that also many use them to access their activities such as educational and economic nature. And if we are going to bridge this gap, we need to solve their problems. And as an organization, Kenya Red Cross, we also focused or we kind of use a user-centric design approach in one of our projects that also kind of involves the community, bringing workshops to the people, and about building empathy, deep empathy with the users whilst co-creating with them as well. And to do this, we offer trainings to the society, workshops, graphic designs, partner with organizations such as Moving Telescope to empower the youth, the vulnerable youths that are currently at home and do not have access to the internet or have been kind of disadvantaged with the digital divide that we're currently facing in Kenya.
Thank you. So you all are, like, in a sense that, like, you all, when I spoke with you, you all have this good tech background as well, or you all are at least excited about the use of technology in designing these solutions. And Philomena already talked about what TechVG Kenya is doing. The same for Odelia a little bit, talked about this user-centric approach, but do you all have like some good tech examples, perhaps solutions coming out of the hackathons as well that you've seen have worked towards helping the vulnerable groups? And it can also be designs or solutions designed by the vulnerable people themselves. Philomena, perhaps, I remember you mentioned the hackers group, Faceless Hackers, correct?
Yes, correct. So perhaps I can begin with a bit of background. So in 2019, in April of 2019, TechVG's Kenya hosted a hackathon. And so the theme of the hackathon was, the theme and the problem statement were designed in collaboration between TechVG's Kenya and Kenya Red Cross. And so the theme of 2019 was to address an e-health solution challenge. And so TechVG's worked with Kenya Red Cross, came up with a problem statement. And then during the hackathon, one group emerged as a winner, and this group was called Faceless Hackers. And so during this year of 2020, the TechVG's Kenya team, working hand in hand with Kenya Red Cross as well as with Faceless Hackers, worked together to move the MVP to become a workable solution. And so we worked together, given that the Kenya Red Cross are the experts on the ground and they understand the challenges that are being faced on the ground. TechVG is offering assistance in terms of the technological side of being able to design the application. So we worked together throughout the second half of 2020 to come up with an e-health solution. So this solution, the purpose of the solution is to assist in logging health-related incidences around Kakuma refugee camp. But the pilot site for this solution is Kalobeye settlement, which is still within the region of Turukana area, Kakuma. And so we piloted this. We launched the pilot in November, and currently the solution is being used with Kenya Red Cross employees working hand in hand with community health volunteers. And so currently the solution at the current stage, the solution is in three forms. So we have a web dashboard, we have a mobile application, and we also have a USSD application. And so the reason why we went with the three of them is that we recognize that some members of the community in Kalobeye and Kakuma probably do not have access to smartphones. And so at the very bare minimum, they should be able to log these health related incidences using even a feature phone, using a USSD code. And so using the USSD code, the user is prompted to through a series of steps, and is prompted to enter the health concern that they're facing, and they can also enter the location. And so once this is received on the side of Kenya Red Cross, then the team at Kenya Red Cross are able to identify which resources and also who needs to respond to that challenge. And I think Odilia will, talk a bit more about, the contribution that Kenya Red Cross and how the application assists Kenya Red Cross in, logging these health-related concerns. And so back to the application. So there's a USSD bit, and there's also a mobile application. And so using both the mobile application and the USSD application, the end users can log these health-related concerns. And then on the web dashboard, now this is what the administrators on the side of Kenya Red Cross use to basically just have an overview of all the health-related incidences that have been logged on the system. And then now from there, they can identify who will respond to what concern in which region, and can also look at which cases have not been responded to and which ones are closed. So I think I can hand it over now to Odilia to give the perspective from the Kenya Red Cross side on how the application is assisting them.
Yes, Odilia, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Philomena, for the chance. As Philomena initially introduced, we worked with them, and together with Google Oracle, a partnership last year. So we met the Faces Hackers team that includes about 4 people, 3. So they were able to build us a solution, a 3-module solution that was highlighted by Philomena: the USSD, the web, the mobile dashboard, the mobile application, and the web dashboard. So what we as Kenya Red Cross are using the solution for, the USSD provides a menu where because from time to time, community health volunteers in Kakuma take rounds within the village where Kenya Red Cross operates in. And whilst doing the daily monitoring, taking the rounds around the community, they're able to report and identify health issues that might need to be looked upon by the responsible KRCS staff, maybe the public health officers that we have in Kakuma. So whilst the CHVs are in the field, if you maybe realize, oh, okay, this household has symptoms of COVID, you're able to go to the USSD. Okay, first we have the mobile application, but since most people or internet connectivity is a challenge in the area, mobile application can be used when there is internet connectivity to report, where you can report the case, the condition, and to get the exact location of where the reporting is coming from. Considering that initially we used to face issues in reporting health-related problems because, one, there were delays in reporting from before the information could come from the team members, community to the staff. The issue has already worsened, or if it's an outbreak, it has already happened. And also we had issues with language barriers, which the app also sort of tries to implement, such that we're going to have like 3 options in a language. Option for the USSD, and for the mobile application, we're going to include Arabic, Swahili, and English, so that we're going to enable the entire community, everyone that is in the camp, be able to report the available or the really emergency cases that we as KRCS need to know. And the fact that the location names of the camps do change from time to time. And so the app provides us with a way that we're able to actually pinpoint where the issue is coming from. And we can always be able to monitor. So if I'm a KRCS public health officer in Kakuma, I could use the dashboard one to allocate the case to a CHV or to another officer to take a look at it. Or I can even call the person that reported the cases to get further information about it. And I can also use the web dashboard to get further data from what has been reported. I can be able to analyze what I have with me, maybe for the past 1 week, and also maybe be able to predict, okay, am I going to have an outbreak? What do I need to focus? What are the prevalent diseases, the cases in the community, so that I can be able to focus more on what is needed and be able to know what are the needs of the people in the camp. And also kind of, because the question also kind of highlighted on what other projects are we doing as an organization that involves the vulnerable people themselves, I might highlight the community inclusion currencies that KRCS, Kenya Red Cross, together with Grassroots, are currently or has been initially implemented in different branches, Wale Siaya, where there's actually a success story on community inclusion currencies. This is like a mobile money token. M-Pesa greatly changed the Kenyan's perspective on mobile-based money transfer services. So mobile money token kind of highlights a bit of aspects of M-Pesa, but it's to be implemented in areas where there's scarcity of the national currency to complement the currency and not to replace it. So many people have been empowered with smartphones or feature phones. However, the pandemic has seen the scarcity of natural currencies in different households, and many face different challenges that they cannot be able to attain their basic needs. So as an organization, together with other organizations, we're wondering, can we leverage technology to enable these people attain their basic needs without in the lack of the Kenyan currency? If they do not have money, how can we enable you to buy milk and you to buy bread from me, provided given that we do not have money? So I think that's where CICs came from. Community Inclusion Currencies, what we refer to as Sarafus, provides a platform where we have more like a barter trade, but the thing where we actually are involving the vulnerable people themselves is that we are providing the tech to them, but from there, we cannot be able to help them anymore. It's an effort from the community themselves to help themselves and to use the community inclusion currency, Sarafus, to trade amongst themselves. So we include people like shopkeepers, local grocery traders, border guys, people who sell water, to come together as a community and to use these sarafus to sort of create a barter trade situation in the community where we do not have currency, but I can send you 20 sarafus and you can give me this, or I can come buy water from you and I can pay maybe with like 10 sarafus if you allow me. And tomorrow you can come buy vegetables from me and pay with a given amount of sarafus. And maybe if you have any amount of cash that you can top up on it, I will take it. But provided that you and I are able to attain our basic needs from time to time. And I think a success story has to be where in Mukuru, where as an organization, we implemented the Sarafus, an informal settlement in Nairobi. Sarafus are used to get water, food, and most importantly, during this pandemic, soap and sanitizers. Communities are able to leverage the availabilities of Sarafus in their hands to get more of their needs. And in Siaya, in Kenya, in about, I think, Nyanza, Kenya, if I'm not wrong, communities even use sarafus to trade during market days, kind of putting we as a humanitarian organization out of the picture for a minute and enabling the communities, the vulnerable population, to trade amongst themselves, to find a way that they can create a self-sustainable environment for themselves to better themselves. So I think highlighting some of the projects, some of the ways we are leveraging technologies has to be the CIC's community inclusion currencies and the Faces Hackers project that we are working with, hands in hand with Tech Fijis, and that we are currently implementing in Kakuma. And we hope for the best as we are in the process of seeing and getting feedback on how we can improve the app and how the society is going to easily adapt and how we can use the application to avert serious health issues that might come in the future. Thank you. Back to you, Marie.
Thank you. I hope it's going to work out well for you. I like how you both touched like some of the areas that are not even, or some of the solutions that are not even that tech related, like exchanging certain items and helping those in needs. So this is truly inspiring and good to hear, and also encouraging to all of us, to viewers at home as well, that it doesn't always have to be a tech solution. And also the hackathon participants, we stressed a lot, it has to be a clickable prototype. Yes, it kind of does in the course of the hackathon, but it doesn't have to be necessarily a tech solution in its essence. John, you've seen lots of hackathons and participated, probably mentored, and you also seen lots of tech solutions in your work at UNHCR. What are some of the misconceptions about the products? You mentioned that you've seen misconceptions about the products that are developed for the vulnerable groups. Can you share some light on that?
Sure, absolutely, Mary. And I will actually go back to the point that you were just raising, that taking innovative approaches is not just an application of technology. And I think that that's where sometimes some of the solutions that are designed fall down. They may have been tech solutions thought up in a black box somewhere far away from communities. And actually, the innovation process really requires meaningful engagement and participation of communities through every step of the journey. And Odelia and Philomena touched upon the importance of a human-centered design approach, and that's absolutely the case. I think that idea that we're not sort of far removed from communities is one of these misconceptions, that technology in itself will be a panacea to creating that. And actually, innovation can be quite a messy process. When you start to engage with communities, understand the challenges that are unique to that context, and not only, as I said earlier, not for a homogenous group, but the different types of people you have in that community. Is an elderly woman just as easily able to sort of use a solution as the younger men? All of those things that will come up through good user testing, and I think that is, one of the better ways of approaching this. And yeah, the misconception is maybe that homogeneity, that just because we did something somewhere means it'll work exactly the same in this location, because it's all very different. There are different enabling policy environments in different contexts, whether refugees are in settlements or have freedom of movement. In others countries, they're encamped. So all of these different dimensions need to be taken into account, and I would definitely encourage anybody who wants to sort of put their efforts and time into supporting these great causes to work with organizations like the Kenya Red Cross, refugees, UNHCR, and others who are close to these communities. UNHCR's presence in over 140 countries, where we're supporting refugees and forcibly displaced and stateless persons to be more self-reliant by encouraging environmental inclusion. And that comes with some experience, and I think it's great to be part of an event like this with Garage48, because I think we can talk about these together and discuss. And actually, an open call to anybody watching, we are trying to continuously improve the way that we're working, work with new partners and so on. So please do get in touch with UNHCR if you're interested in trying to tackle some of these challenges together.
Definitely get lots of calls and emails. Thank you. I didn't ask you, John, and you touched the misconceptions at the moment, and getting to know the problem really well before rushing to the solution, and working with all these community partners who are working with these particular groups of people, and they know the problem the best. So getting to know that before starting to design a solution. But do you have something cool or exciting, or that made you smile as a solution that you've seen recently that we perhaps haven't heard of?
Yeah, it's good to talk about examples because it makes it clear in people's mind. And I think I'll not talk about Kenya because I think my colleagues have got that covered in terms of interesting solutions. But I'll maybe just bring up 3 examples, and just to say, with our program, so our service and our digital inclusion program is funded by the government of Luxembourg. We have projects in a wide variety of countries, over 30 countries, where we've distributed over, I think, $500,000 to date, and continuously investing more in these sorts of projects. Within this, we have a real emphasis and support for refugee-led organizations, or where the host community is also working with refugees. A couple of the examples that probably go across high-tech, low-tech, and no-tech solutions. In Malawi, we were working with a refugee who had taught himself how to code, and actually had a small little facility where he had maybe like 6 or 7 people cramped in, teaching them Python and JavaScript, which was obviously amazing. And one of the things that people like is, taking all of these things that are already happening and trying to accelerate and empower these people. So with a partnership with Microsoft, we actually managed to extend it to a full new center, bringing in additional hardware, training programs, and that was empowered Remy, who is a refugee, to actually build a full cohort of students, continue teaching them and scale up what he was doing. And that's obviously paid dividends. And as the refugees learned how to code through him and with the extra support provided, they started developing their own mobile applications to help address local challenges within the camp they're in Zuleika, where they were sharing information through these apps and so on. So taking what was already coming from a refugee, a great idea, but just needed that support to get going, obviously created then innovative solutions that the community was building amongst themselves. The second example is a project that we were working on in North Africa, in Algeria, in Tindouf, where the refugee community were sort of trading goods, and Odelia mentioned the, currencies are sometimes tricky, for marginalized communities. They actually were like, okay, we actually need a mobile application to help us trade and advertise goods and services that we want to provide and enable us to access them. So through that, the idea that came from the communities, we worked with UNHCR operation in Algeria to help support development of that app. And that isn't something that, we do in a box far away, but actually working with that refugee community group to build this to their specifications, to their needs, and obviously allow that to build and grow. The last example I'll give is in Uganda, where we're working in the north. There are, as you may know, 1.4 million refugees in Uganda, the majority displaced from South Sudan following conflict and violence. In the northwest of Uganda, there's about 1.1 million. And within that, there are many amazing community-led organizations looking to empower people through technology. One organization is C10, another is Sina Locator. You can probably find the Facebook pages of these groups, and we've tried to work with these communities to support. With Sina, we had a partnership with the UK satellite provider Avanti to help build a community hub where they're providing training and support to communities. And with C10, we had provided seed funding to get them started with technology empowerment centers, which they have obviously built and turned into their own things. They're now doing film, video editing courses, everything you can believe. And that's not because of us, that's because you had a group of community members who were excited working with host communities to build solutions to challenges that they were facing and really work on those together. So there's just a couple of examples that sort of straddle from the high tech, coding and so on towards the more of the process and the ability and the things that we can achieve when, communities are empowered. And it's not about coming in from outside and duplicating, but rather supporting those groups who are closest and to those challenges.
You actually said that right now, mentioned that the communities come on board. How easy it is to find people that are excited about what you do, or how easy it is to gather the communities around you in your work? For you, as a UNHCR representative, I imagine it's probably easier for you than to some of the communities, but how does it happen usually?
That's a good question. I mentioned earlier the proximity that UNHCR has to communities, and that's a great help in terms of engaging with them in almost all of the contexts we're working. We have and work with communities in terms of the way that we manage and support them. Obviously, the type of support that UNHCR provides is quite different in some, let's say between a refugee camp or refugees in an urban area, quite different. But we generally have community structures that we work with and speak to. And that's obviously, as mentioned earlier, not, just across one type of group, but based on age gender diversity protocol that we try and ensure that's representative as well. More often than not, if you have an open door and are willing to listen, then people will come to you. I think the way that you actually build that up is not a one-stop, hey, we'll turn up when we want a conversation, but trust is built over time. And actually being able to start a meaningful relationship with communities and being there and supporting them, not having that sort of shut and stepping away is one of the things that has allowed UNHCR to build up the trust of communities in the countries that we're working in and develop these sorts of projects together with them. And I would encourage those who are thinking of building these solutions. I understand that it may not be that you could be present in northern Uganda for the next 2 or 3 years, but work with organizations that can be, and it's not just UNHCR, there are many other, not only international NGOs, but local NGOs, as well as the aforementioned community, established community-led organizations that are going to be there to take these things forward. And I think that working through those is obviously one real important way of building trust with those communities we're aiming to serve.
Thank you. Ladies, back to you, Odelia and Philomena. For me, it seems to be a very, I don't know, perhaps it's just my outside opinion, but it seems to be quite a close-knit community. And also, John already mentioned, when you do something and you do it for a good cause and it seems to be working, it obviously automatically spreads interest and others join on board as well. How do you grow the community around you who helps you on your cause?
Well, maybe I could take this one. Okay. As Kenya Red Cross, we work with volunteers at hand. I think currently we have about 150,000 volunteers in different communities. So for us, when we come up with ideas or we come up with projects, we are able to easily disperse and work with communities because our volunteers are based in the communities where we are trying to implement the project in. So we kind of and we also have worked on different projects before that have positively impacted the communities before. So it's not that hard to pass the idea across to the communities when we're trying to bring something new. And also from the help that we have from our volunteers that are from the communities, we are able to have community engagements with the community leaders, with the government officials. We're able to disseminate the information, inform them of the project, and try to get them on board before we implement the project into communities. So kind of makes it easier for us to get everyone on board and to get the entire community on board. And also the volunteers that really, really help us disseminate information and the government officials. So I think, yeah, it's not a challenge for us as a community.
Thank you for that. I think Odelia, you covered also Filomena's response for that, right? Or
yeah, I just thought to add on to something that because TechFugees is a small organization as compared to the UNHCR and Kenya Red Cross. And so I think from the perspective of TechFugees, how we're able to grow our community is first of all through partnerships. I think partnerships have been very, very essential in growing our mission as TechFugees Kenya. And so these are partnerships with organizations that have worked with TechFugees in the past, both locally and with TechFugees Global. These organizations such as Google, Oracle, the Kenya Red Cross. I know we've worked with the UNHCR before, perhaps not in my capacity as a co-lead, but TechFugees has worked with the UNHCR before. And so we find that these partnerships are very, very important. And currently also we're focusing on partnering with organizations, community-based organizations that work directly with displaced communities. And so that's the focus that we have as TechFugees Kenya, working directly with community-based organizations. And we're able to get these links through our own networks, through what we do professionally, because we've worked with marginalized communities and displaced people individually through our work. And so we leverage these connections to get in touch with other community-based organizations that are working with refugees and displaced people directly. And so we find that has really worked for us in spreading our mission as TechFugees. And also through our social media, that's how we were able to get people to participate in our events. That's how we get people to join our hackathons, and also volunteers who come on board to help us, manage the chapter operations. So that from our perspective is how we're able to grow our community.
Very cool. You're obviously all very passionate people, and I guess it's perhaps unnecessary. And I'm not going to ask it, I'm just going to say it. For you, job seems more like your life. It seems like your mission as well. You're doing it with a spark in the eye and sparking this around, giving the spark to everyone around you as well. Because we are running out of time quite soon, I just wanted to perhaps close it with a few words from you towards the hackathon participants in the next few days. It's 10 to 13, so they still have like 2 full days to work. There are lots of hackathon teams that are tackling the vulnerable populations, perhaps not even on that specific track, but perhaps on the fintech or some other tracks, but the solutions are designed towards the vulnerable populations. So my question to you, just few words for the hackathon participants. Filomena, perhaps back to you right now. What would you wish to them?
Okay, so off the top of my head, I think one piece of advice to the hackathon participants is to consider an open source approach in developing your solutions, so that the impact of your solutions can be felt not only in the populations that you're focusing on now, but even later, opening up the solutions to the tech community. Sorry, there's a bit of feedback there. But basically, to consider having an open source approach to developing the solutions that are going to come out of this hackathon. And once the winners are selected during this hackathon, to work hand in hand, as John had previously mentioned, working hand in hand with the populations that you're seeking to support through the solution. So to work hand in hand with them so that the solution actually addresses the challenges that they face. So I think those two are my pieces of advice to the groups.
Odelia.
Yeah. I think also what came up top to my head was also similar to what Philomena said. When developing their solutions, they need to put or to have this in mind that it should be in architecture or involve components that can be disseminated to other places as well, considering that we're trying to find a solution that works all over Africa. So when developing the solution, it shouldn't be limited to working specifically in Kenya. It should be developed in such a way that if I decide to implement the solution in Malawi or Zambia, the solution will still work over there. And also not to give up. I know it kind of takes too much, and initially the funding from period of developing to piloting, sometimes you don't see the vision of whether your project or your development will scale up. So maybe not to give up during the process. They can easily get funding through talks, grants, and they could always scale up their idea to help more and more individuals in society.
Thank you. And John?
Yeah, pieces of advice. I think I'd be repeating quite a lot of what Philomena or Delia said. I think that the hackathon is usually the beginning, right? There's a lot of work that comes afterwards, and don't be disappointed if nothing happens immediately, because it requires a lot of hard work after the fact. Hackathons are great for bringing people together, generating ideas, and having that sort of acceleration at the beginning. But that is just the beginning, and it needs to continue. And I would say don't lose hope if you're feeling like stuff. Keep going. I think another thing is to keep your eyes up. So you're not doing this alone working in a hackathon. There are lots of organizations already out there doing many things, whether that's tech refugees or others, and you don't have to do it all yourself. Working in partnership is, and we've talked about partnership, maybe not directly, but quite a lot today. And actually, it's a really important thing to emphasize. And I think when people are thinking through their business models or however the approach that they want to take it, is that they're going to need to work in partnership with lots of different organizations. And keeping your eyes up to who those partners are, how they work, is really, really vital. And lastly, just links to that, I think it's good to do your homework, particularly with relation to those sorts of business models, humanitarian financing, understand how all that works, because I've spoken to many teams, particularly where they're sort of either startups or social enterprises, and they think, oh yeah, the humanitarian organization would just pay us to do that. And there are very particularities about how this works, and you need to understand it and do your homework and talk to organizations like UNHCR and the big NGOs, because the more you understand that, the more chance you'll have of succeeding with your ideas.
Excellent words, excellent finishing. Do your homework, don't give up. You're not alone. It is a community, especially I believe in this topic. It really does seem to be a super close, tight-knit community. Thank you so much, Philomena, John, and Odelia, for a nice talk today. And definitely follow the finals, follow the lives to see if there are some interesting new solutions out there coming up as well. Thank you so much.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Still on.